The silence of the suburbs is supposed to be peaceful, but that day it felt like a warning. I stepped out of the Uber, my bones aching from the 6-hour flight and my heart still heavy with the scent of lilies and damp earth. I was 67, and I had just buried my sister Grace, my only sister. I was still wearing my black funeral dress. It was wrinkled, stained with tears, and clinging to my skin like a second layer of grief. All I wanted was to walk through my front door. The door of the house I had scrubbed, painted, and paid for with 40 years of sweat, and sink into my favorite armchair with a cup of chamomile tea. I wanted my son Robert to hug me and say, "I'm sorry for your loss, Mom." But as the Uber pulled away, my breath hitched in my throat. My lawn, my perfectly manicured green lawn, was covered in black plastic garbage bags. Boxes were piled high near the driveway. At first, I thought maybe Robert was finally cleaning out the garage, but then I saw it. Propped against a tree was my grandmother's vintage vanity mirror, the one I had told Robert never to touch. Beside it was my collection of rare first edition books, scattered on the grass like worthless flyers. "Robert," I whispered, my voice cracking. I hurried to the porch, my heels clicking sharply on the stone path. I didn't even have to reach for my keys because the door swung open before I could touch it. There stood Danielle, my daughter-in-law. She was holding a glass of expensive wine, my wine, and wearing a silk robe I had never seen before. "Oh, Carol, you're back early," she said, not a hint of sympathy in her voice. She didn't look at my black dress. She didn't look at my red, swollen eyes. "Danielle, what is my furniture doing on the grass? What is happening?" I pushed past her, my heart hammering against my ribs. The house smelled different. Gone was the scent of my lavender candles. It smelled like heavy French perfume and expensive takeout. My living room, which I had decorated with memories of a lifetime, was empty. My Persian rug? Gone. My family photos? Missing. "We did a lifestyle audit, Carol," Danielle said, leaning against the doorframe, her eyes cold. The house was feeling so cluttered, so dated. "We're going for a minimalist modern aesthetic now. You know, for the baby." I froze. "The baby? I'm pregnant, Carol," she said, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "And the doctor says I need a stress-free environment. That means no old junk, no dusty memories, and certainly no extra bodies crowding the master suite. We've converted your room into a nursery. It's painted Arctic white now." "My room? But where am I supposed to?" "The utility room," she interrupted, pointing toward the back of the kitchen, near the damp basement stairs. "We put a cot in there for you. It's cozy. And since you're retired, we figured you wouldn't mind helping out with the chores and the cooking to earn your keep." At that moment, Robert walked down the stairs. He was wearing a new designer watch, the kind that costs $5,000. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "Robert," I gasped, reaching out for his arm. "Tell me this is a joke. Tell her she can't throw my life into the trash." Robert cleared his throat, looking at his shoes. "Mom, Danielle is stressed. The pregnancy is high risk. We need the space. And honestly, you've lived here a long time. It's time for a change. Just go to the utility room, okay? We'll talk about it tomorrow." He didn't just close the door to my bedroom. He closed the door to his heart. I stood in my own kitchen, a stranger in my own home, still wearing the dress I wore to my sister's grave. I looked at the small, dark utility room, a space meant for mops and buckets, and then I looked at the black bags on the lawn. They thought I was an old woman who could be pushed into a corner. They thought because I was grieving I was weak. They thought they had won because they had the youth and the audacity. But they forgot one thing. I didn't just buy this house. I built the foundation. And if they wanted a clean out, I was going to give them one they would never forget. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My grief had turned into something cold, sharp, and very, very dangerous. "Hello, Mr. Mendes," I said when the call connected. "It's Carol. I need you to pull the deed for the Clearwater property and call the private investigator we discussed last year. It's time." I looked at Danielle, who was laughing at something on her phone in my living room. "Enjoy the wine, Danielle," I thought, "because it's the last expensive thing you'll ever taste in this house." The floor of the utility room was cold, but the fire burning in my chest kept me warm. I sat on that raggedy cot, my laptop glowing in the dark. Robert and Danielle thought I was just a grieving old woman, a relic of the past they could discard. They had no idea that before I spent 40 years cleaning offices, I was a bookkeeper. I knew how to follow the money, and I was about to follow it right to their doorstep. I logged into my retirement fund. My heart sank. $45,000. Gone. I started scrolling through the transaction history. $1,200 at a high-end baby boutique in Beverly Hills. $5,000 for a wellness retreat. $8,000 for a down payment on a car I'd never seen. They weren't just living in my house. They were bleeding me dry while I was away burying my sister. I felt a surge of cold, hard clarity. Grief was a luxury I could no longer afford. The next morning, I didn't come out to make breakfast. I didn't offer to scrub the floors. I waited until I heard the espresso machine, the one I bought, hissing in the kitchen. I walked out, still in my funeral dress, and stood in the doorway. Danielle was scrolling through her phone, rubbing her stomach with a performative sigh. Robert was checking his new gold watch. "Robert," I said, my voice as sharp as a razor, "we need to talk about the $45,000 you stole from my savings." Robert choked on his coffee. He looked at Danielle, then at me, his face turning a guilty shade of red. "Mom, stole is a strong word. We invested it. For the family. For the baby's future." "Invested it in what?" I shot back. "Designer clothes and luxury spas? That was my sister's legacy. That was my safety net." Danielle rolled her eyes, leaning back in the chair. "Look, Carol, let's be real. You're 67. What were you going to do with that money? Buy more lavender candles? We're young. We're building a life. Besides," she added with a nasty smirk, "this is our house now. Consider it back rent." I felt a chill go down my spine, but it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. "Actually, Danielle," I said, pulling a manila folder from under my arm, "I spoke to my lawyer, Mr. Mendes, this morning. You see, Robert, you always were a procrastinator. You never followed up on the deed transfer paperwork 3 years ago. You said you were too busy. Well, that busyness just cost you everything." I tossed a document onto the table. "The deed is still in my name. The property taxes are in my name. And as of 8 a.m. this morning, I have frozen the joint account. Any further attempt to withdraw funds will be flagged as elder financial abuse." The color drained from Danielle's face. She looked like she'd been slapped. You can't do that. I'm pregnant." "Then you better start saving your pennies, sweetheart," I whispered, leaning over the table until I was inches from her face. "Because as of this moment, you are no longer family. You are tenants. And your first month's rent, at full market value, is due on Monday. Or you can take your lifestyle audit and find a new place to live." Robert stood up, his voice shaking. "Mom, you're being crazy. Where are we supposed to go?" I looked him dead in the eye, the son I had sacrificed everything for, and felt nothing but a cold, distant pity. "I don't know, Robert. Maybe you can sleep in a garbage bag on the lawn. I hear it's the new minimalist trend." I turned around and walked back to my tiny room, leaving the sound of their frantic arguing behind me. This wasn't just a clean out. It was a war. And I was just getting started. The next morning, the sun hit the dusty window of my utility room, but I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a general preparing for battle. I spent the early hours on the phone with Mr. Mendes. We weren't just looking at the house. We were digging into Robert's lifestyle. "Carol," Mr. Mendes said over the phone, his voice grave, "I ran a preliminary check on the car Robert's been driving. It's a lease. But here's the kicker. He put your name down as a co-signer without your knowledge. He used your high credit score to bypass the checks." My blood ran cold. Identity theft. My own son had forged my signature. I walked into the kitchen at 9 a.m. Danielle was sitting at the island, looking through a catalog of $2,000 cribs. She didn't even look up. "Robert's at work, Carol. And don't forget, the dishes from last night are still in the sink. Since you're staying here, make yourself useful." I didn't head for the sink. I headed for the front door. "Where do you think you're going?" Danielle sneered. "To receive a guest," I replied calmly. A silver sedan pulled into the driveway. Out stepped Mr. Mendes and a man in a dark suit, a process server. Danielle's smug expression faltered as she saw them approaching. I opened the door, and the process server handed me a stack of papers, which I immediately handed to Danielle. "What is this?" she hissed, snatching the papers. "It's a formal notice to quit," I said, my voice steady and cold. "In the state of New York, since you have no lease, you are considered month-to-month tenants. I am giving you 30 days to vacate the premises. And that's not all." I turned to Mr. Mendes, who handed Danielle another document. "This," Mr. Mendes intervened, "is a summons for a civil suit regarding the $45,000 withdrawn from Mrs. Miller's accounts. We are also filing a police report for identity theft regarding the vehicle lease. Unless every cent is accounted for by Friday, the authorities will be involved." Danielle's face went from pale to ghostly white. She started to shake. You wouldn't send your own son to jail. I'm carrying your grandchild. If there even is a grandchild," I whispered, stepping closer to her. "Because a woman who lies about money and steals from the grieving usually doesn't have a soul, let alone a miracle inside her. I want a medical confirmation of this pregnancy from a doctor I choose, or this mercy I'm showing ends today." Just then, Robert pulled into the driveway in his shiny new SUV. He saw the men in suits and ran inside, looking panicked. "Mom, what's going on? Who are these people?" I didn't answer him. Instead, I walked over to him and grabbed his wrist. I looked at the gold Rolex shining in the sunlight. "Nice watch, Robert," I said. "Did you buy this with the money meant for my heart medication? Or was this from the sale of Grandma's vanity?" "Mom, I can explain." "Don't," I snapped. "You have 30 days to find a life you can actually afford. And Robert, I'm changing the locks this afternoon. You'll get one key, and if I find one more piece of my furniture on that lawn, I won't just sue you. I'll make sure the world knows exactly what kind of man you've become." As I walked back to my room, I heard Danielle scream at Robert. "Do something. You said she was just a senile old woman." I sat down on my cot and smiled. The first crack in their perfect stolen life had appeared, and I was going to make sure the whole house came crashing down on them. The house was like a pressure cooker. Robert was barely speaking, and Danielle was spending most of her time locked in her new nursery, probably plotting her next move. They thought they were being smart, but they forgot that I was the one who had been managing this household for decades. I knew every creak in the floorboards, and I knew exactly when the trash was taken out. It was Tuesday trash day. I watched from the kitchen window as Danielle hurried out to the big bins at the curb. She was carrying a small white grocery bag, tied tightly in a double knot. She looked around nervously before dropping it deep into the bin and covering it with a heavy bag of lawn clippings. My gut told me something was wrong. When the coast was clear, I went out. I'm 67, but my resolve gave me the strength of a woman half my age. I pulled that white bag out and took it back to my utility room. My heart hammered against my ribs as I tore the plastic. Inside were several boxes of expensive pregnancy tests, but as I looked closer, I realized they weren't used. They were empty boxes, and at the bottom of the bag I found something that made my blood run cold. Receipts from a specialized theater supply store. Prosthetic silicone belly grade A. The receipt read, "Stage makeup. Pale complexion kit." I sat on my cot breathless. She wasn't just lying about the money. She was faking the one thing that was keeping Robert on her side. She was wearing a fake belly to manipulate my son and guilt-trip me into silence. Just then there was a knock on my door. It was Robert. He looked exhausted, his eyes bloodshot. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked, stepping into the cramped space. He looked around at the mops and the smell of bleach, and for a second I saw a flash of the little boy I used to tuck in at night. "I'm sorry about the legal papers. Danielle is. She's hormonal. She's scared. Please, can't we just drop the lawsuit? We're going to be a family soon." I looked at him, my heart breaking for the man he had become. A man so easily fooled. I held the theater receipt behind my back. "Robert," I said softly, "I want to believe you. I really do. But I need you to do one thing for me. If Danielle is having a high-risk pregnancy, she needs a real specialist. I've made an appointment for her tomorrow at 10 a.m. with Dr. Eris. He's the best OB/GYN in the state. I've already paid for the consultation." Robert's face lit up with relief. Thank you, Mom. I knew you'd come around. I'll tell her. Oh, and Robert? I added as he turned to leave. Make sure she goes. Because if she misses that appointment, the eviction notice stays. And the police report for that Rolex in the car lease? I'll sign it by noon. I watched him run upstairs to tell her the good news. 10 minutes later I heard it. The screaming. I'm not going to some doctor she picked. Danielle yelled. She's trying to poison me. She wants to kill the baby. Danielle, she's paying for it. Robert shouted back. It's the best doctor in the city. Why are you acting like this? I leaned back against the cold wall of the utility room and checked my phone. I had already messaged Mr. Mendes. The morning of the appointment felt like the air before a storm. Heavy, still, and suffocating. Danielle came downstairs dressed in an oversized sweater, clutching her stomach and moaning about morning sickness. I don't feel well, Robert, she whined, her eyes darting toward me. I think we should just reschedule. My regular doctor says I need bed rest. The appointment is at 10 o'clock, Danielle, I said, sipping my tea. The car is already outside. If you don't get in it, Mr. Mendes will be at the police station by 11 o'clock with the fraud report. Your choice. Robert looked caught between them. He loved his wife, but the fear of jail and the loss of his luxurious lifestyle was starting to outweigh his loyalty. Let's just go, babe. It's for the baby's safety. We arrived at the clinic. Dr. Eris was a no-nonsense man, a friend of my late husband. He knew exactly what was happening because I had briefed him the night before. As we sat in the sterile white exam room, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Danielle was sweating. She kept adjusting her sweater, looking like a trapped animal. All right, Danielle, Dr. Eris said, entering with a cold professional smile. Let's get a look at this little one. Robert, Carol, you can stay. It's a big moment. Wait. Danielle jumped up. I need to go to the bathroom first. I feel faint. The nurse will assist you, Dr. Eris said firmly. But first, let's get the vitals. When the nurse approached to lift her sweater for the ultrasound gel, Danielle lost it. She pushed the nurse's hand away. Don't touch me. You're all in on this. Carol is trying to steal my baby. Danielle, calm down. Robert yelled, embarrassed. It's just an ultrasound. And oh, she screamed. In her panic, she tripped over the footstool of the exam table. As she fell forward, a sickening thud echoed in the room. But there was no cry of pain. Instead, there was a strange hollow hissing sound. Underneath her sweater, the baby bump had shifted. It was now sitting near her hip, lopsided and deflated. The room went silent. Dead silent. Robert stepped forward, his face a mask of confusion. He reached out and touched the lump. It didn't feel like flesh and bone. It felt like rubber. With a trembling hand, Robert pulled up the hem of her sweater. There it was. A high-grade silicone prosthetic belly, strapped to her thin waist with Velcro and skin tape. One side had punctured during the fall, leaking air. Danielle. Robert's voice was a broken whisper. Where is the baby? Danielle scrambled back, her face contorted in a mix of rage and shame. I did it for us, Robert. You were going to lose the house. Your mother was going to kick us out. I had to give you a reason to fight her. You lied. Robert staggered back, hitting the wall. For 7 months? You let me buy a crib? You let me steal from my own mother's retirement for a child that doesn't exist. I stood up, my heart cold as ice. I didn't feel joy. I only felt a deep, profound pity for my son, who had traded his soul for a ghost. It's over, Danielle, I said, my voice echoing in the small room. The lifestyle audit is finished. Robert, if you want any chance of me not pressing charges against you for the bank theft, you will walk out of this clinic, go to the house, and throw every single thing this woman owns onto the driveway. I looked at Danielle, who was now sobbing on the floor, the fake belly looking pathetic and wrinkled. And Danielle? Don't worry about the minimalist aesthetic anymore. Where you're going, the rooms are very small and the walls are usually gray. It's called a jail cell. I walked out of the room, leaving the echoes of Robert's realization and Danielle's screams behind. The first part of the clean-out was done. But the real work, the work of rebuilding my life, was just beginning. The drive back from the clinic was silent. Robert sat in the driver's seat, his hands trembling so hard he could barely hold the steering wheel. Danielle had refused to get in the car. She had called a cab, screaming that she'd sue us all. As soon as we pulled into the driveway, I didn't wait for Robert to open my door. I stepped out, breathed in the fresh air, and looked at my house. For the first time in months, it didn't feel like a prison. Felt like mine. "Robert," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet street. "Open the trunk." He looked at me confused. "Mom, what are we doing?" "We are doing exactly what Danielle suggested when I first arrived." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We are doing a lifestyle audit. Only this time I'm the auditor." I walked into the house, grabbed a heavy-duty black trash bag, and handed it to him. Every single thing she bought with my money, the designer shoes, the $800 handbags, the silk robes, goes into these bags. Now. Robert hesitated for a split second, but one look at my face told him I wasn't playing. He started in the nursery, the room that was supposed to be mine. He tore down the Arctic white curtain she had installed. He dragged out the expensive and used crib. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he choked out as he hauled a box of Danielle's makeup to the curb. "I was such a fool. I thought I was becoming a father. I thought I was protecting my future." "You weren't protecting your future, Robert," I said, watching him work. "You were selling your soul for a comfortable lie. You stood by and watched that woman throw my sister's memories into the dirt. You watched her put your own mother in a utility room. Your apology doesn't fix the floor I slept on." By 3 p.m., the driveway was a graveyard of luxury. Her clothes, her vanity, her modern decor, all piled up like the junk she once called my belongings. Just then the taxi pulled up. Danielle stepped out, her face red from crying, her baby bump now completely gone, leaving her looking small and hollow. She saw her life piled up on the pavement and shrieked, "You can't do this. I have rights. I live here." I stepped forward, holding a legal document. "Actually, Danielle, you don't. Since you're not pregnant, the medical emergency clause you tried to use to stay here is void. And since Robert never signed the deed, you have no legal claim to this property. I've already called the locksmith. He's inside right now." "Robert, do something," she yelled, turning to my son. Robert looked at her, and for the first time the spell was broken. He didn't see a beautiful wife. He saw the person who almost sent him to prison for fraud. "I am doing something, Danielle," Robert said, his voice flat. "I'm doing what I should have done months ago. I'm choosing my mother." He walked to the front door, went inside, and shut it. The sound of the deadbolt clicking into place was the most beautiful music I had heard in years. I stood on the porch looking down at her. "There's a bus stop at the end of the block, Danielle. I suggest you start walking, because if you're still on my property in 10 minutes, I'm calling the police to report a trespasser." She looked at the pile of bags, then at me, and finally realized she had lost. There was no baby to hide behind, no husband to manipulate, and no money to steal. She grabbed one suitcase and began the long, lonely walk down the driveway. I walked into my living room. It was empty and echoing, but it was clean. "Robert," I called out. He came out of the kitchen, looking like a broken man. "Yes, Mom." "Get the mop," I said. "There's a lot of filth in this house that still needs to be scrubbed away. And tomorrow we're going to the bank. You have a lot of hours of overtime ahead of you to pay back every cent you took." "I'll do whatever it takes," he whispered. "I know you will," I replied. "Because if you don't, the utility room is still vacant. And I hear it's a very minimalist place to live." The house felt like a ghost town for the first few days. Robert was living in the basement now. I had made it clear that he had lost the privilege of a bedroom until he proved he could be a man of character. Every morning at 6 a.m. I woke him up. No more designer watches, no more sleeping in. "The contractor is coming at 8 o'clock, I told him, standing over his cot. "You're going to help him rip out that Arctic white carpet Danielle installed. We're going back to the original hardwood." Robert groaned, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, I have work." "You have a second job now, Robert," I reminded him coldly. "You're working for me until the $45,000 is back in my account. Every cent you earn at the office goes to the bank. Your lifestyle is now bread, water, and hard labor." But there was one thing that still hurt more than the stolen money. My sister's furniture. Danielle had sold my grandmother's vanity, and the antique dining table to a local boutique owner for pennies just to buy her fake designer bags. I spent 3 days tracking those pieces down. I found them in an upscale vintage shop downtown. The owner, a woman named Elena, was sympathetic, but she was a businesswoman. "I paid $2,000 for the set, Carol," she said. "I've already spent money restoring them. I can't just give them back." I looked at the vanity. I could almost see my mother sitting there brushing her hair. I could see my sister Grace laughing in the reflection. "I'll pay you $3,000, I said. "But I don't have the cash right now. My son will be here tomorrow to move furniture for you. He'll work every weekend for the next 2 months to pay off the difference. Does that work?" Elena looked at Robert, who was standing behind me looking ashamed, and then back at me. She saw the fire in my eyes. "Deal," she whispered. That weekend, while Robert was hauling heavy cabinets for Elena, I was back at the house. I had a surprise visitor. It was Danielle's mother. She pulled up in a flashy car, looking ready for a fight. "Where is my daughter? How dare you throw her out on the street? She's sensitive." I didn't even let her inside. I stood on the porch crossing my arms. "Your daughter is a fraud. She faked a pregnancy to steal my home and my retirement. If you want her, she's probably at a cheap motel. Or maybe she's looking for her next victim." "You're a bitter old woman," she screamed. "I'm a homeowner," I corrected her. "And if you don't get off my property, I'll call the same lawyer who is currently drafting the lawsuit against your daughter for grand larceny. Would you like his number?" She sped off, tires screeching. That evening, the house started to look like home again. My grandmother's vanity was back in its corner. The hardwood floors were shining. Robert came home, his clothes covered in dust and his hands blistered. He looked at the vanity and then at me. "I didn't realize how much I had let her destroy," he whispered. "Destruction is easy, Robert," I said, handing him a cleaning rag. "Rebuilding is what takes strength. Now start polishing. We have a lot of history to bring back to life." I sat in my armchair, the one they had thrown on the lawn. It was a bit scratched, but it was comfortable. I looked at the wall where a photo of me and Grace hung. I felt her spirit smiling. But I knew the battle wasn't fully over. Danielle wasn't the type to go away quietly. She still had the keys to the SUV, the one Robert had illegally co-signed for. And she was about to make one last, desperate move. The peace I had fought so hard for lasted exactly 4 days. It was 2 a.m. on a rainy Thursday when the phone rang, shattering the silence of my newly restored bedroom. It was a sergeant from the local precinct. "Mrs. Miller? We have your son's vehicle in custody. It's been involved in a high-speed hit-and-run on the interstate." My heart stopped. Is Robert okay?" "Your son isn't here, ma'am. The driver was a woman named Danielle. She's currently in the hospital under police guard. But since your name is on the lease as a co-signer, you're financially responsible for the damages. And they are extensive." I woke Robert up. Within 20 minutes, we were at the police station. The news was worse than I thought. Danielle, in a fit of rage and likely under the influence of something, had tried to flee the state with the SUV. She had crashed into a parked police cruiser and a storefront. The insurance company was already refusing to pay because of the Criminal Act clause. The dealership wanted their $60,000 for the totaled car. And because Robert had forged my signature on that lease, I was the one the lawyers were coming for. Robert sat on the plastic chair in the waiting room, his head in his hands. "Mom, I've ruined us. Everything you've saved. It's going to go to the lawyers in the dealership. I'm so sorry." I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, but I also saw something else. A man who was finally feeling the weight of his own choices. "Stay here," I said. I walked into the hospital wing where Danielle was being held. She had a few scratches and a neck brace, but she was fine. When she saw me, she started to laugh, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "You think you won, Carol? Look at you. You're going to be bankrupt. I crashed that car on purpose. If I can't have your money, nobody can. You're going to spend the rest of your life in that utility room because you'll have to sell the house just to pay for my mistake." I walked up to her bed. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I leaned in so close she could smell the lavender on my skin. "You forgot one thing, Danielle," I whispered. "I'm not a victim anymore. I'm a witness." "What are you talking about?" she sneered. Mr. Mendes didn't just file the eviction papers, I said, pulling a small USB drive from my purse. He also got the security footage from the bank where you and Robert withdrew that $45,000. And he found the emails you sent to the dealership using my stolen identity to authorize the lease. That's not just a mistake. That's identity theft, wire fraud, and grand larceny. The smirk vanished from her face. I'm not paying for that car, Danielle, I continued. I've already filed a fraudulent identity claim with the police. I'm testifying against you. Every cent of that damage is going to be pinned on you and your estate. And since your mother is so rich and sensitive, I'm sure she'll love paying your legal fees while you wait for your trial. You wouldn't, she gasped. I buried my sister in a black dress, Danielle. I slept on a cold floor because of you. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I walked out of that room without looking back. Robert was waiting in the hallway. What now, Mom? He asked, his voice trembling. Now, I said, we go home. And tomorrow you go to the DA's office. You're going to give them a full statement about the forgery. You're going to tell them everything. It's the only way to save yourself from going down with her. But she was my wife, he whispered. She was a predator, Robert. And it's time you stop being the prey. The day of the hearing was gray and rainy, fitting the mood of the last few months. I stood in the hallway of the courthouse, wearing the same black dress I had worn to my sister's funeral. But this time I wasn't hunched over with grief. I stood tall. Robert was beside me, looking thin and pale. He had spent the last month working 18-hour days between his office job and moving furniture for Elena. He hadn't touched a drop of alcohol, and he hadn't asked me for a single dollar. Mom, he whispered as the bailiff called our names. Are you sure about this? If I testify, I might lose my license to practice accounting. I might go to jail too. I looked at my son. Robert, you lost your way a long time ago. This isn't about your license. It's about your soul. If you want to be my son again, you have to be a man first. Tell the truth, no matter the cost. We walked into the courtroom. Danielle was there, sitting with a high-priced lawyer her mother had hired. She looked at us with pure venom, but when she saw the folder in Mr. Mendes' hand, her eyes flickered with fear. The proceedings were brutal. Mr. Mendes presented the evidence. The bank records, the fake pregnancy receipts, and the security footage of Danielle signing my name on the SUV lease. Then it was Robert's turn. He walked to the stand, his voice shaking at first. But as he looked at me, he grew steady. He confessed to everything. He admitted he knew about the money, he admitted he had been weak, and he admitted he had watched his wife abuse his mother. He didn't make excuses. I forged the signature, Robert said, looking directly at the judge. My wife pushed me, but I am the one who held the pen. My mother is innocent. She is the victim of my greed. The courtroom went silent. Danielle's lawyer tried to argue, but it was over. The judge ruled that because of the proven identity theft and fraud, the $60,000 debt for the totaled SUV was transferred solely to Danielle and Robert. My credit was cleared. My home was secured. As the officers moved to handcuff Danielle, who was now screaming and cursing at the top of her lungs, the judge turned to Robert. Mr. Miller, because of your full confession and your cooperation in the bigger fraud case against your wife, I am sentencing you to 500 hours of community service and 2 years of strict probation. But, the judge leaned forward, you are lucky to have a mother who values the truth more than her own comfort. Don't fail her again. We walked out of the courthouse as free people. Danielle was being led away in tears, her lifestyle reduced to an orange jumpsuit. What now, Mom? Robert asked as we stood on the courthouse steps. I have no money, no career, and a criminal record. I handed him a key. Not the key to the master suite. Not even the key to the front door. It was a key to a small one-bedroom apartment near the furniture shop where he was working. You're not coming home, Robert, I said softly. He looked at the key, stunned. But I thought I was forgiven. You are forgiven, Robert. But you are not the same man who lived in that house. You need to build your own home now. You need to earn your own furniture. I will love you and I will have Sunday dinner with you. But my house is finally a sanctuary of peace. And I intend to keep it that way. He looked at me for a long time and then for the first time in years he gave me a real hug. A hug that didn't want anything. "Thank you, Mom," he sobbed into my shoulder. "Thank you for not letting me get away with it." I watched him walk toward the bus stop. A man with nothing but a key and a second chance. I got into my car and drove toward the house with the pale yellow walls. The clean-out was almost complete. The house was finally quiet. Not the heavy, suffocating silence of grief or the tense silence of a war zone, but a peaceful living silence. I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and violet. The pale yellow paint of my house seemed to glow in the light. I had spent the last week truly cleaning out. I didn't just throw away Danielle's leftover junk. I reclaimed every corner. My sister Grace's favorite quilt was back on the sofa. My grandmother's vanity was polished to a mirror shine. The utility room? It was now a walk-in pantry, filled with jars of homemade preserves and the scent of cinnamon. Every Sunday, the doorbell rings at exactly 5 p.m. It's Robert. He doesn't come in with a key anymore. He knocks. He brings flowers, sometimes just daisies from the supermarket, but they are bought with money he earned with his own blisters. We sit in the kitchen and we talk. Not about money, not about the past, but about his progress. He's finished his community service. He's working as a junior clerk, slowly earning back his reputation. He's not the man he was, and that's a good thing. As for Danielle, the news reached me through Mr. Mendes. She couldn't afford the bail, and her mother, realizing her daughter's reputation was a liability, finally cut her off. She's serving time for identity theft and fraud. Sometimes when I'm gardening, I think about her. I don't feel anger anymore. I just feel the cold satisfaction of a lesson well taught. I walked over to the mirror in the hallway, the one I had defended with my life. I looked at the 67-year-old woman staring back at me. My hair was a little whiter, and the lines around my eyes were a little deeper. But my back was straight and my eyes were bright. I realized then that Danielle was right about one thing. It was time for a lifestyle audit. But she was wrong about what was useless. The old things, the memories, the dignity, the boundaries, and the strength of a woman who has survived 40 years of hard work. Those were the most valuable assets I owned. I took out my phone and opened my social media. I posted a picture of my front door, wide open to the breeze. I did a clean out, I wrote. I got rid of the toxic, the fake, and the cruel. It took me 67 years to realize that my house isn't just made of bricks and mortar. It's made of respect. If you're sleeping on a cot in a utility room of someone else's making, stand up. Change the locks. It is never too late to be the empress of your own life. I put my phone away and walked into my kitchen to put the kettle on. I wasn't just Carol Miller anymore. I was a woman who had fought for her peace and won. The house was pale yellow, the tea was hot, and for the first time in a long, long time, I was home. This story isn't just about a house or money. It's about not letting anyone dim your light, no matter how much they think they've won. If you have a Carol in your life, a mother, a grandmother, or a friend who is being mistreated, send this video to them. Let it be their wake-up call. Hit that share button right now. You never know whose life you might change with one simple click. Let's spread the strength and show the world that justice always finds a way. And if you want to see more powerful stories where the truth comes to light and the underdog wins, then subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. Join our community of millions who stand for what's right. Don't let the next story pass you by. Become a part of the journey today.